in the meantime, all together, in the Middle Ages, when the castle was built here as a stronghold, the site of power from the medieval times, about 35 million bricks had to be made to make it. I'm always underlining the number of bricks because it had to be a very rich investor to afford not making bricks, but to employ workers. We sometimes wish we could be such rich employer today to do the maintenance. And then, of course, the medieval bricks were fired in a low temperature. Remember, wood was used at medium in kilns. And therefore, such brick powders. And whole brick Europe has the same problem, not only us. The brick powders, especially ladies can take a little bit of the brick powder and make the makeup, which is quite unhealthy, don't do it. But the problem started in the 19th century. The brick was so much powder. Up to today, I come from nearby Gdańsk, and we have a wall from the Middle Ages, more or less the same time when the castle was built, and we can collect the powder from the 14th century. And up to today, we have the 21st century. As I always say, we have microwaves, cell phones, we fly to the moon and back, and we still cannot cope with that problem. In the 19th century, even more. So, the problem was solved in a simple way. I call it, I'm sorry, I'm not an architect, put the makeup on the walls. The bricks in some places, 19th century bricks, is a layer on a medieval powdered brick. Of course, there was also restoration and reconstruction, but in places it's the makeup, as we call the makeup of the walls. And then you see the third color or kind of bricks, which will be very pale. It's the post-Second World War brick. We all know what happened. This was the area which was so-called East Prussia. And therefore, when the Red Army started like the avalanche from the east going onwards to the west to Berlin, this was one of the first stops, let's say, as a stronghold. While the Nazis established here a fortress, they had to take it. There was the shelling, the bombing, and the result of that you will see where the pale brick is. The castle was destroyed in about 60%. It says nothing about the destruction because, for example, I cannot imagine 60% of destruction of these huge walls. You will see a picture. Okay, I've said that was the shortest introduction of the castle I've ever given. And one more thing, look at that plaque, St. Mary. You know, the Teutonic Castle, you probably know that very well because we travel around Europe, exists. In Vienna is their main site, and whenever the Grand Master comes here, he always looks at the castle. He says he wishes he could have such a big house in Vienna. St. Mary, the patron. St. Mary's Hospital Order of the German House in Jerusalem. I always have to count because, you know, the medieval names were very long. We shortened it during the history for Teutonic Order, Ordo Teutonicus, or the German Order, because there were mostly Germans. You know all the stories of Richard the Lionheart and the Crusaders and the times of the Crusades, when the Knight Templars, the Knights Hospitaller, and the Teutons were established in the Holy Land. The Templars, we know what happened to them. That's why we say that 13th Friday is always an unlucky day, because that was the day when they were nearly all arrested. However, not all, because some fled here to the land beyond. This is Prussia. So this was such a far land that nobody could find them. Even they probably themselves couldn't. So this was also a good place to survive and settle. The Knights Hospitaller, they went to what we call today Southern Europe. And what happened to the Teutons? They picked the invitation. They answered the invitation of one of the Polish dukes to come and help him against the Baltic Prussian tribes. We sometimes call them pagan, let me call them pre-Christian tribes. Very fierce people, good soldiers, not afraid of anything. We sometimes say that death was their god, goddess, call it however. And they were invading inside Poland, which is not far from here, about 300 kilometers or so. And that is why if you had a problem in the Middle Ages, you called the mercenaries, or you called the Crusaders. The Crusaders were handy, and they gladly answered the invitation. And finally, they established a state, which was the only, in the Middle Ages, the only monastic state comprising of 58, some historians say even 60,000 square kilometers. Along the Wisła River, the Wisła is the next river to the west, the main river of Poland, Vistula, ending her flow in Gdańsk, to the Baltic. That was the good place to settle along the river, which was navigable, by the way, and then turning to the right, to the east, along the Baltic. That was perfect, because you had everything. Sand, fish, amber. Amber, it was money. Today we use it as jewelry. We love it, but it was money, it was power, because it's medicine. Up to today, when we sometimes enter into the old, very old Catholic church, you can smell the scent of incense. It's amber. Because when we polish amber, most of it goes to dust. We collect it, and then we burned it in churches. That was the use of amber also in the Middle Ages. Rosaries were made of amber. So if you had amber, you had power. If you had the sea, you had power. And that is why the Teutons grew in such a might that they could rule about 60,000 square kilometers with only about 1,000 officials. I'm dressed like an official. There was about 500,000 people living. They were all subject to the ruler from here. Who was the ruler? We could call him the abbot, but he called himself the Grand Master. So let me invite you into the Grand Master's domain. Come on.